black people currently find themselves at the bottom of the socioeconomic ladder globally, which is why, as somebody who's part of that quote unquote group, even though I'm an individual, I have to say to them, look, let's do better than that, right? If we find ourselves at the bottom, let's band together. And I think it's normal. Like I spoke to you last time, right?
Yeah.
And I was like, it's normal. People have got teams.
It's totally normal.
Build your team up.
Yeah.
Right? And then play the game. That's
normal.
it. Build your team up.
Normally, it would be social pressure that stigmatizes certain kinds of behaviors. But if there's a certain group that you're not allowed to exert social pressure on, as in just criticism, say that's rubbish. Why are you doing that? You're gonna end up with all these negative things. But if there's a barrier that says no, you can't say that against those people because of the color of their skin, how does that help those people? How does that help those people change their behavior?
It doesn't. And I've said black people currently find themselves at the bottom of the socioeconomic ladder globally, which is why, as somebody who's part of that quote unquote group, even though I'm an individual, I have to say to them, look, let's do better than that, right? If we find ourselves at the bottom, let's band together. And I think it's normal. Like I spoke to you last time, right?
Yeah.
And I was like, it's normal. People have got teams.
It's totally normal.
Build your team up.
Yeah.
Right? And then play the game. That's
normal.
it. Build your team up. Stop worrying about, because I actually saw the other day, it was on GB News. There was a lady, I forget her name, but she wears her hair, it's always slits down. Black lady. Slim. She was on GB News. Anyway.
Right, yeah.
But they were talking about the countryside and how it was too white, right? And how the countryside was too white.
Do you feel the countryside's too white?
And I was like, in my head, I was like, you're living in a majority white country.
Yeah.
Right? You're going to get places that a lot of white people are, right? So for you to attempt to, let's say, shame people for having their, I don't know, their alcoves, right? Of whiteness doesn't make any sense to me. But I'm going to say something controversial.
We can clip out for YouTube.
No, it's fine. I'm going to say something controversial. The people that, the black people for me that complain about racism and white supremacy all the time are the black people that want to be let into parties that they just want to get into. Because it's like, look, the Russians are allowed to do their thing. The Chinese are allowed to do their thing. I'm not going to go into a Russian party and be like, not enough black people here, mate, don't you think? You be like, it's a Russian party, brother. Like, what are you talking about? Like, what are you talking about? So it's like the people that complain about it, for me, are the people that want to be let in and jig with the other people. And I'm like, you don't have to. You can build your own.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean you hate other people. And that's what I want to get across, actually. I think the problem comes with hate. I think that all peoples are allowed to be themselves.
Yeah.
I think white people of all denominations, whether you be Irish or Russian or whatever, are allowed to have that. The problem comes when you hate people, when you're in that space.
Do you see a lot of hatred from the sort of English community towards other communities?
The English don't like the French much.
Oh, well, okay, well that's different.
The English don't like the French much. I know that much.
Yeah. But I mean, like, do you see like English people like on TV or in politics or anything saying I hate black people? Or
no, I don't see that. But like I was saying, the thing about this is that as somebody who's grown up black, right? He's grown up black. There is a level of paranoia that exists within a lot of black people. And the reason why the paranoia exists is because of the confusion, like I said, like the bipolar schizophrenic nature of saying one thing, doing another thing, saying another thing. So, we'll abolish slavery, but we'll get your continent. Yeah. We'll be cool with you, but we'll take all your resources. So it's like, okay, listen, I don't want to be paranoid, but that is not consistent. Okay, it's not consistent in what you're saying. And so, no, I don't see white people saying, oh, I hate all black people. But then you have to look at the governmental structure and say, okay, well, what are these governmental structures doing in these black countries to these black people with the black resources? Because the world lives off Africa. If we're honest with ourselves, like even we've got our tablets and laptops here now, it's got cobalt and coltan in it. That's 85% of the cobalt and coltan is from the Congo.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And so it's like, the resources of Africa fund the world.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So,
I'm not saying you're wrong.
So I'm just saying, if the resources of Africa fund the world, are those resources always got the right way?
I would suggest they're not. And I think that the main problem is that is not imperialism now, but it's corruption, right?
Right.
So I think the one problem that I think a lot of African countries really struggle with is the fact that not just Europeans either essentially buy off their leaders and allow them to take these resources at rock bottom prices.
Right.
And this keeps Africa as a continent very poor.
But then you have people like, I don't know, Ibrahim Traore, who's the youngest president in the world now.
Is this the guy?
Or from Burkina Faso.
That's it, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So what
he's got a scar on his face, hasn't he?
He's got a scar.
Yeah, he looks mean, man.
He looks like he's been through some
things.
Yeah,
right?
right?
And I bet he has.
People are saying that he's like the spirit of Thomas Sankara. I don't know if you know Thomas Sankara.
I don't.
Who's like I don't know, the ancestors have come back again in him, right?
Okay,
and what it is that he's had to oust the French and stop the French from doing a lot in the country, right? And like you said, some people are saying, oh, you shouldn't do that. And I'm like, well, Jacques Chirac just said, that's what they've been doing. He's trying to stop it. And so, it's like.
Honestly, I'm just hearing Brexit. That's all I'm hearing.
Right.
I'm just hearing Brexit. I don't want the French and the Germans getting our money. What is that? What was that face?
I've been silent because I'm trying to listen and learn. Like that, I've heard very little I agree with. I'll be honest.
Okay,
I mean, go for it.
Go on then.
I mean, even that, I find strange. I mean,
it's the same impulse. The desire
Russians
for self.
helping you do a coup. I mean, I agree that
the desire for self-determination is what underpins it.
Exactly. That's what
when they
about.
did the Brexit vote, we weren't getting it. I remember we met Korwin Mikke, this Polish politician, and his advice was go and get some generals. I mean, fair enough. But I just.
So what did you?
I don't know what any of this has to do with white privilege. I'm so confused.
Well, no,
because white supremacy is normally implemented by a geopolitical structure, not so much you. I'm not going to say you're a white supremacist,
okay, this is your example, but I just don't get that either. That's not white supremacy. Example? That's just geopolitics.
Yeah, but you
can do that to white people or brown people. It doesn't actually matter if you're.
Yeah, but that's why the term white supremacy isn't useful, right? Because what it is European imperium. Is really what he's saying.
European imperialism.
Well, it doesn't have to be European.
No, it doesn't have to be. It's just in this particular case.
It's not. I mean, many countries engage imperialism in the past
and
now. And some of them are European, some of them aren't.
Sure. I mean, Africa's problem is going to be China, right?
That would be Chinese imperialism.
Yeah.
If China took over the rest of the world, it would be Chinese imperialism. You wouldn't call it Chinese imperialism. You just call it imperialism.
It would depend on the circumstances, but if they're coming in the way, say, the French did, and setting up a Chinese protectorate and whatnot, I would agree that's imperialism. But a lot of what I see the Chinese doing, for example, I disagree with the right on this, where they're like, oh, it's them setting up debt traps, etc. The Chinese are pretty stupid in this regard. Like, they're usually doing the kind of bare minimum to just extract some stuff that wasn't going to be extracted either way. So I don't think that actually fits the term imperialism. Just business.
So if China was to take over huge swathes of the world with war, with their army, would you call that Chinese imperialism?
If you do it with war, yeah.
Right. And I think that's what has happened with Africa. That's why it's called white supremacy or European imperialism, because it was done with war.
Yeah.
It wasn't just like, oh, how you doing, mate?
It's imperialism for the French or the British or whoever else, but the idea that it's European or white,
But they are white. It's by default,
it's just
what they are.
Not very relevant, though.
Well, it kind of ropes in people like the Norwegians and the Finns because they're also white. The problem is it's just an inaccurate.
I get that. I understand that.
Which is
because they weren't involved.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, it weren't me.
Yeah. Yeah, the Latvians are just like, what are you talking about?
Yeah. The Swedish are like, oh, what
yeah. So right. That's another problem that I have with it.
So what you're saying is that it's been lumped in with all white people.
Yeah, it's a broad and thin category. Whereas if you said British imperialism, French imperialism,
European imperialism, or
broad, but again, that's quite broad because there are definitely.
If Europeans, let's just use that term, could do it to other Europeans, they have no problem with it and have done it. I mean, the Soviet Empire collapsed in the 90s, and those guys were imperial subjects of the Soviet Empire.
However, the reason I think, this I said about people understanding what certain things are, because with white supremacy, right, came a pseudoscience, and I don't know a pseudoscience that's been used from European to European, but with Carl Linnaeus,
you should see some of the 19th century depictions of the Irish.
Right, with the Irish, I can say you can say that with the Irish.
They did,
but or the Germans,
Germans. But generally, if you look at, because there was Africanus,
Americanus,
Europaeus, and Asiaticus, who Carl Linneo, which is a taxonomist, done
Yeah.
in the 1700s. And he categorized and said, this is what these types of people are. And so there was a whole pseudoscience behind white supremacy also. It wasn't just like, oh, do you know what I mean? It was a whole movement.
Yeah.
And so people have to understand that there's like
But that's actually
a hangover from that.
But that's I find confusing your definition of white supremacy, because in that example, it wasn't just we're different species or whatever group, and therefore
No, we're all
it's the
human.
seven. No, I'm arguing from the perspective of someone who made that chart, right?
Yeah,
They would
Carl Linneo.
say- that there's 7 different groups or whatever, and they're saying that the white group is the superior group because of XYZ. That's actual supremacy. Like I still struggle with even understanding your definition of white supremacy.
So that's not supremacy.
I'm saying so the guy who sets out the 7 groups, the reason he does it is not just to be like, this is science. He also used it to say the white group is the superior one.
Yes.
That's white supremacy.
Right.
That's what I would understand that term to mean. And
Right.
That's why I say,
But with what I'm saying, with that psychology, imperialism came.
It's a justification.
It's a justification for imperialism. It was used to say, listen, you see these Negroes, they're not very smart, are they?
Yeah.
Because Carl Linnaeus, he wrote it and he's a scientist and he said they're not very smart. So we can do that.
it's not quite like that though, because those justifications came a lot longer after we'd already purchased slaves and started setting up colonies.
Sorry, say that again?
So the justification for taking over land and subjugating people who weren't white because of the 7 categories or whatever. My understanding is that
that came in the 1700s, this the categorization.
I get that, but it was largely, especially in the modern context, for empire expansion used by the Americans. When it came to European powers, I mean, we were engaging in slave trading on the basis of race for a lot longer before.
From the
But
1400s.
the counterpoint to that is almost any theory is a post hoc rationalization of existing practices and beliefs anyway. So it's kind of natural for conquering people to think of themselves as better than anyone who's they've conquered.
Well, the Russians need to take care of the rest of the Slavic world.
Absolutely.
It's not unusual.
So, but I mean, after the fact, to justify why you were able to do that, you create a series of theories.
But am I correct in thinking that you're saying that the European imperialism that happened is not part of what you would call white supremacy? It wouldn't be, or it would be, because I'm a little bit confused.
Depends on the circumstance, because take the Americans, for example. I mean, their history is very different, but they're still of Anglo-Saxon stock, like 90% or whatever it is. When they would justify getting rid of the Indians, I mean, yeah, that's on the basis. They use racial theories for this, not just that they're savages and need to be moved on. In the later years, especially, they use the white supremacy stuff. But if you're just doing it because of geopolitics, like the bloody French are going to take huge swaths of Africa, so we need to move in and take what we can as well. You're not doing it because you necessarily hate black people. You'd happily do that to a white nation as well, if it meant that you could get one over on the French.
Well, I would say this as the psychology of believing that you are superior to another group of people was a major factor in holding the Berlin Conference.
Yeah, I have
it's a major factor.
It's not that you're wrong that we would happily conquer the French had we the power to do it. But when it came to, in particular, the 19th century and scientific theories of race, there was definitely an element of white supremacy in there.